Man, know thyself. Never forget that the universe is a single living organism possessed of one substance and one soul, holding all things suspended in a single consciousness and creating all things with a single purpose that they might work together, spinning and weaving and knotting whatever comes to pass. That was Marcus Aurelius. Friends, I feel deeply honored to speak to you on behalf of the board of ITC and give the keynote lecture at this year's conference on Man, Know Thyself. We have worked on its main ideas during several board meetings. I'm thus trying to give you not only my own lines of ideas, drawn from the age-old wisdom, but those of the entire board of directors. Hopefully, they all agree with what I made of it. Of course, it is impossible to give a complete outline of this very deep subject, central in any human being's life. But we will dive into it more deeply during the next days. So I do not tell you anything new, dear friends, if I state, based on the idea of boundlessness and oneness, that universal brotherhood is a fact in nature. You will understand this thought from the following ideas. As you all know, the sentence "Man, know thyself," and "Thou shalt know the universe" was carved in stone at the portal of the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, Greece, so that everyone who entered the temple was reminded, and even we still today still remember it. It was so important that it marked the entrance to the Holy of Holies of one of the most important sacred places in Greece of ancient times. If we look around us today, the question, who am I, seemingly lost its significance, and whenever it is asked nowadays, it is not answered adequately. At best, reference is made to our personality, name, profession, gender, or other external characteristics. My name is such and such, my profession is such and such, I'm German, Italian, Brazilian, and so on. Is that me? Should we perhaps better ask, what am I? Remember, the sentence goes, "Know thyself, and thou shalt know the universe." There is in fact much more than just knowing our own personality. 3 questions arise from these thoughts. What is man? What is that self which we should know? And what is our relationship to the universe? Only when we know who or what we are do we have a good starting point for our lives, because only then can we truly recognize the meaning of life and align ourselves with it. Only when we realize this can we also recognize and unfold and use our possibilities in life, assume our responsibility, and, as it is so beautifully expressed in our literature, live the life. Where does man come from? What is he, and where is he going? What is the meaning of life? When Madame Blavatsky founded the Theosophical Society in 1875, following the mandate of the Masters of Wisdom and Compassion, she provided answers to precisely these questions, which still inspire and stimulate reflection not only among theosophists all over the world today. The sound basis from which these questions should be considered was given to us in the prologue of the Secret Doctrine, and you all know these passages, so I will make it short. The Secret Doctrine establishes three fundamental propositions. An omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, that there is one absolute reality which antecedes all manifested conditioned being. This infinite and eternal cause is the rootless root of all what is, what was, is, or even shall be. It is of course devoid of all attributes and is essentially without any relation to manifested finite being. It is beingness rather than being, in Sanskrit sat, and is beyond all thought or speculation. It is the first logos, unexplainable, unexplained, the abstract idea behind everything, the Tao of the Taoists, which can only be described a negation. The Tao which can be named is not the eternal Tao. Then the second logos, eternal motion. In the second proposition she describes the eternity of the universe in toto as a boundless plane, periodically the playground of numberless universes, incessantly manifesting and disappearing, called the manifesting stars and the sparks of eternity. Within the third logos, then, which is the fundamental unity of every soul with a universal oversoul, as above so below, emanation starts, and the Secret Doctrine is then talking about the eternal pilgrim. Pilgrim is the appellation given to our monad, the two in one, during its cycle of incarnations. It is the spark of eternity, emanating from the immortal and eternal principle, being an indivisible part of the integral whole, the universal spirit from which it emanates, and into which it is absorbed at the end of the cycle. Every being, from the tiniest firefly to the sun, the galaxy and beyond, is periodically manifesting and disappearing in this boundlessness. Thus is the background the source of all manifestation, our home, where we live and have our being. We, that is each one of us, as well as humanity as a whole, are sparks of eternity, monads, rays of infinity, vortexes in the ocean of life itself. An ocean with no boundaries, no limits of whatsoever kind, being only consciousness itself in various states of expression, active or latent, and on various levels of spiritual unfoldment, from the tiniest atom to the most splendid deity of deities, but ever and always expanding. In fact, there is no individual separate existence. Everything, every being has all potentialities of that omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle. There is in essence only one, but we are living in the illusion of the many because of the variety of expressions, of manifestations of this one. All manifested life is not only part of one immense living organism, but is that organism itself. A web of life, of active and latent energies, of numerous centers of spiritual expressions. The active unfoldment of these vortexes, the awakening of self-consciousness in this vast ocean of life, is then described in the third proposition of the secret doctrine. The third logos is active now, as above, so below. In other words, no purely spiritual buddhi, divine soul, can have an independent, conscious existence before the spark which issued from the pure essence of the universal sixth principle of the Oversoul has passed A, through every elemental form of the phenomenal world of that Manvantara, and B, acquired individuality, first by natural impulse, and then by self-induced and self-devised efforts, checked by its karma, thus ascending through the degrees of intelligence, through all the degrees of intelligence, from the lowest to the highest manas, from mineral and plant up to the holiest archangel, the Dhyani Buddha. That was from the secret doctrine. We see the path before our eyes, which every living entity, every living being, every soul must tread to reach relative perfection, to grow and unfold self-consciousness. It is the unfolding of the potentialities of the universe, which each living being carries in his innermost self. Me and my Father are one, says the Master Jesus in the Bible. In fact, everything which the boundless space is, on all spheres, inner and outer, throughout all the kingdoms of life, is man as well. He is a child of the universe, and therefore inseparable therefrom. And the boundless universe is filled full with spiritual beings, with ethereal beings, with astral beings, each class of such entities dwelling within its own appropriate sphere, each on its own appropriate plane, and each class of such entities having bodies, vehicles, garments, veils fitted to, appropriate for each such sphere or plane or world, just as we human beings on earth have bodies fitted to and appropriate for life here. GDP in questions we all ask told us this. The macrocosm is mirrored in the microcosm. In his letter number 13 of the Barker edition, Master M gives a wonderful description of that central point of unity in which we all are one with everything else in the ocean of life. He says, spirit or life is indivisible, and when we speak of the seventh principle, it is neither quality nor quantity, nor yet form that are meant, but rather the space occupied in that ocean of spirit by the results or effects impressed thereon. Therefore, being is partly a realization of unity. And the conclusion can also be drawn that, like everything in the universe, man is a cooperation of numerous beings of all realms of nature and of many levels. He is a composite being, a hierarchy of cooperating living entities, being at the same time a part or building block of our planet Earth. Our relationship between our planet Earth and the different realms of nature is given by the Master KH in the Mahatma Letters number 15, also the Barker edition. The analogy between a mother globe and her child human can be worked out as follows. Both have their 7 principles. In the globe, in the sphere, the elementals, of which there are 7 types in total, form A gross body, B, its fluidic double, the linga shariram, C, its life principle, that's jiva, D, its 4th principle, kamarupa, is formed by its creative impulse, which acts from the center to the periphery. E, his 5th principle, the animal soul or manas, physical intelligence, is embodied in the plant kingdom, in the germ, and in the animal kingdom. F, his 6th principle, the spiritual soul, buddhi, is man. And his 7th principle, atma, is found in a fine layer of spiritualized akasha that surrounds him. So far the Master. Man is the spiritual soul of the earth. Let that well sink into your mind. We, humanity, should function as a carrier of buddhi, the spiritual or mental principles of the sphere. That means we should act with insight and intuition, guided by our Buddhic thought principle, act according to our conscience, and focusing on our insights on the highest aspects of our thoughts. Again, we are, as any living entity in the vastness of space, building blocks of the universe, building blocks of higher beings, building blocks of the living being Earth, forming its thought atmosphere and cooperating on this sphere. Thus, we are in this process of life more and more developing self-consciousness. Let us first have a look to the diagram which is known to most of us and which we have used already at a former ITC to illustrate the idea of the composite human being. It shows the perishable and the relatively imperishable part, the I am, the I am I, and the vehicle part of the human being with its Sanskrit names. The hierarchy starting with Atman down to the physical vehicle. The 7 principles at each level are knowable according to the level, as the 7 tones in each octave have their place, as each musical instrument makes them sound corresponding to the character of the instrument. And with the example of manas, man, you find that every principle is in itself again 7-fold. Tones of lower and higher octaves resonate with each other. In the Key to Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky gives an explanation of the 7-fold constitution of a human being. Let me just cite here her definition of the highest 3 principles in a human being, together with the 4th, which the majority of humanity is still focused on. She says the higher self is Atma, the inseparable ray of the universal and one self. It is, and I insert the higher monad, the top of the hierarchy, the God above, more than within us. Happy the man who succeeds in saturating his inner ego with it. The spiritual, divine ego is the spiritual soul or buddhi, in close union with manas, the mind principle, without which it is no ego at all, but only the atmic vehicle. The inner or higher ego is manas, the fifth principle, so called independently of buddhi. The mind principle is only the spiritual ego when merged into one with buddhi. No materialist being supposed to have in him such an ego, however great his intellectual capacities. It is the permanent individuality or the reincarnating ego. The lower or personal ego is the physical man in conjunction with his lower self, i.e., animal instincts, passions, desires, and so on. It is called the false personality and consists of the lower manas combined with Kamarupa and operating through the physical body and its phantom or double. A helpful diagram to understand the spheres of actions of the hierarchy of cooperating monads with monads, which clarifies where the human monad is placed, is the so-called egg diagram, which Gottfried de Purucker, fourth leader of the Theosophical Society Point Loma, gave in his Fundamentals of the Esoteric Philosophy. It shows 7 levels of consciousness, 7 spheres, each monad on its sphere containing all 7 principles, partly latent, partly active as well. Depending on the level of expression of the monad. On the right side, we see the consciousness side, the ego side, and on the left side we find the envelopes or souls or vehicles by which this consciousness is manifesting. According to its progressive densification on each of the lower realms, the centers or focuses of activity are given darker color, descending from above to the densest physical sphere. Lower and higher are of course only a way of speaking, because those realms should be imagined as interpenetrating and interwoven globes. For me, this is so special because it helps to understand the interconnectedness of the myriads of monads in the universe, in the micro and the macrocosm. You see there 7 spheres, layers of unfoldment of consciousness, the stages or conditions of beings or consciousnesses on different levels, composed always of a spirit side, advanced monads, and a matter side, less advanced monads. There is no fundamental difference between these two sides. All monads are only in different phases of expressing their infinite qualities, and this is called evolution. How does this work? From the higher monad, our top of the hierarchy, which we belong to, this higher monad emanates a spiritual force to attract a multitude of other monads, call it consciousness, from the archetypical world, and they express themselves on each realm or sphere within the field of the higher monad. They roll out a veil or sphere or world on each realm with a spiritual an ego side, and a matter or vehicle or soul side. And on each of those spheres, there is activity of the inhabitants, cooperating monads of those spheres, which they themselves perceive either unconsciously on the lower realms or consciously from manas upwards. As much as self-consciousness is unfolded, always greater realms of life can be perceived. We are the ego side or the soul side, depending on our level of consciousness alone. Sudratman is that stream of consciousness which is expressing itself through the cooperation of beings on those various realms, forming their focal points from which the next realm or level below emanates. Therefore, there is activity on all realms, but consciously active now on the human one. Thus, we are many and we are one, developing now self-consciousness, mostly focusing and therefore living on the fourth plane of our sevenfold constitution, striving upwards, always higher and higher. First, to become human beings in the real sense of the word, and then more and more, cycle by cycle, consciously developing from the manasic to the Buddhic sphere. And as man must perfect manas to become a perfected human being, the spheres in our monastic principle, that is the thought atmosphere which we create, are meant here. And developing means, of course, being. We only develop what we express in our lives. So we have to be what we are. The grade of spirituality a being can express determines how much it expresses of the infinite and how wisely it can help its fellow beings. It is our task to uplift the lower parts of our constitution, because that is our responsibility towards the lesser developed beings which cooperate with us in our constitution, and also our responsibility towards the greater hierarchies ahead from us. Think of the building blocks I already talked about. History has given us so many examples of the way a human being can, by knowing himself, fulfill his duties for the sake of harmony and uplifting of all beings. Think of the great ones, like the world teachers, Buddha, Shankaracharya, Lao Tse, but also of Socrates, Plato, and even Gandhi and Martin Luther King, all inspirers of humanity. Their examples show us what our potentialities as human beings are. Knowing more about what we are provides the basis for a way of living that leads to harmony for the sake of all. That means if we understand what we are, we find the answer to all life questions. We can solve all problems because we have everything in ourselves, and there is no need to look for anything outside. Knowing yourself is an infinite process, but everyone can start here and now. And as everything is interconnected, there is always help. The lodge of wisdom and compassion is always there to inspire and guide us. Conclusion. What is the point of knowing yourselves? What could or should be our motivation? You can get to the source of all problems and solve them. You can consciously serve others and all life and contribute to harmony in the world. And how do we do that? We will all together work on that during the coming days in the talks, and most of all by communications in the workshops. Tomorrow, Angel Stora Buron will deepen the subject of which I could only scratch the surface with her talk on what is man, the great adventure of being human. The next day is followed by Jim Tepper's lecture on the responsibility of being human. And then on Saturday, we will get very practical with Johanna Vermeulen's talk, Man, What's Next? So let me close with words by William Shakespeare from Julius Caesar. And since you know you cannot see yourself so well as by reflection, I, your glass, will modestly discover to yourself that of yourself which you yet know not of. And this is what we will try to do during this conference. Thank you for your patience.